Thalia Ashworth, a wealthy heiress, discovers a hidden box revealing her husband Desmond's secret. For 50 years, he's lived a double life with another wife, Valencia, and their two children in Serenity Cove. Devastated, Thalia confronts the shocking betrayal of her seemingly perfect marriage. Instead of rage, she seeks truth, traveling to meet Valencia, a marine biologist unaware of Thalia's existence. As the two women unravel Desmond's intricate deception, an unlikely bond forms. What will they decide when they face Desmond together? Will Thalia reclaim her life, or will secrets destroy everything? If this story gripped you, please subscribe to our channel. Your support fuels more captivating tales like Thalia's. Hit that button, share with friends, and join our community. Tomorrow we've got an exclusive story waiting just for you. Don't miss out. Let's keep the journey going together. I grew up in Cascadia Bay, where the Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly before our family estate, perched high on cliffs that seemed to whisper secrets of the divine. My childhood was a parade of privilege, sailing lessons on sun-dappled waters, private tutors who shaped my mind, and charity galas where I mastered the art of smiling at precisely the right moment. Money was the silent undercurrent of our lives, as vital as air, yet never acknowledged. My father, Ambrose Ashworth, built his empire on a revolutionary vision, that luxury and environmental stewardship could intertwine. While other hotel magnates raised forests for concrete behemoths, he crafted eco-resorts that melted into their landscapes, preserving the Earth's beauty. By my 20th birthday, Ashworth eco-resorts spanned 3 continents, and we were more than wealthy. We were trailblazers, visionaries. Never apologize for excellence, my father would say, his weathered hands gripping my shoulders, his eyes fierce with conviction. But remember, Thalia, true wealth lies in what you protect. I thought he meant the environment, the pristine coastlines we championed. Only later did I realize his words were a warning about something far more personal. I met Desmond Merrick in my final year at Briarcliff University, a world apart from the polished trust fund heirs who courted me with calculated charm. Desmond was different, a marine engineering student on a scholarship, his focus razor-sharp, his presence unassuming yet magnetic. At the university's annual regatta, he barely registered my existence. "You're blocking my light," he muttered, not lifting his eyes from the nautical map he was annotating with meticulous care. I stood frozen, stunned by his indifference. No one had ever spoken to me with such casual disregard for my family name. "Do you know who I am?" I blurted, instantly mortified by the entitlement in my voice. He pushed his wire-rimmed glasses up his nose and looked at me, his amber eyes catching in the afternoon sun like molten gold. "Should I?" he asked, a faint amusement softening his tone. In that moment, I wasn't Thalia Ashworth, heiress to an empire. I was just a girl, wind-tossed hair and all, standing on a dock, stripped of pretense. It was exhilarating, like stepping into a new skin. Our connection didn't spark instantly. For months, we were friends, sharing coffee and conversations about marine conservation. Desmond showed me sketches of underwater habitats he was designing to nurture coral reefs, his hands animated, his voice alive with purpose. His passion was a force, pulling me into his orbit. "The ocean doesn't care about your name or your fortune," he said once as we walked along the shore, waves lapping at our feet. "It only respects those who honor its power and guard its mysteries." And to me, it was poetry, raw and unfiltered, a declaration of a world unbound by the constraints of my upbringing. I was captivated, not just by him, but by the possibility of a life defined by something deeper than wealth. Our first real date wasn't at an upscale restaurant like Lask, where I suggested we dine. Instead, Desmond proposed a picnic at the lighthouse, where we ate simple sandwiches as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of fire and dusk. He pointed out constellations, naming each star with a confidence I later learned he'd borrowed from a library book that very afternoon. When he kissed me, the world tilted, his lips tasting of salt and endless potential. "I think I could fall in love with you," I whispered, my breath warm against his neck. He pulled back, his expression grave. "Don't think, Thalia. No, I'm not something you try on like a new dress." Driving home in my sleek convertible, I realized I'd never had to earn anything in my life, not truly. But Desmond was different. He demanded effort, authenticity, and that made him more precious than anything my family's fortune could buy. My parents, predictably, were wary. Desmond didn't belong to our world of polished manners and inherited wealth. He met my father's probing questions about engineering with bold confidence, never deferring, and complimented my mother's art collection with genuine curiosity rather than rehearsed flattery. "He's after your money," my mother warned, twisting her diamond bracelet with on a frown. My father was more pragmatic. "If he makes you happy, that's enough. But get a prenup. Love doesn't safeguard assets." At 23, I was certain I knew love, blind to the need for caution. We married the following spring in a ceremony that, despite my wish for simplicity, graced the society pages. Desmond, uncomfortable in his tailored tuxedo but breathtakingly handsome, spoke his vows with unwavering certainty. "I promise to build a life with you that matters," he said, his amber eyes holding mine. "Not because of what you have, but because of who you are." I believed him with every fiber of my being. The early years were a dream. We settled in a Victorian home in Meridian Heights, close enough to my parents for connection, far enough for independence. Desmond's career at Vertex Dynamics soared, his innovative submarine habitat designs drawing attention from governments and research institutions. I poured my heart into Luminina Wellness Center, a holistic therapy practice blending traditional and alternative medicine. "You don't need to work," Desmond said once, his tone gentle but firm. "Your trust fund could support us forever." But I craved purpose, not just privilege. "I want to build something of my own," I told him, and I meant it. The center became my sanctuary, a place where I was Thalia Merrick, not just an Ashworth heiress. Our shared passion was collecting antique nautical maps and artifacts. Weekends were spent at estate sales and auctions, Desmond studying the precision of each chart, while I was drawn to the stories they held, tales of explorers in uncharted seas. Our home became a gallery of these treasures, framed maps, antique compasses, model ships preserved under glass. Each piece was a testament to our shared journey, a secret language only we spoke. One evening, after hanging a rare 18th century map of the Pacific Northwest, Desmond wrapped his arms around me. "Do you know why I love maps?" he murmured. "Because you're a navigation nerd?" I teased, leaning into his warmth. He laughed, his breath tickling my ear. "Because they show every possible path, but leave the choice to you." For 50 years, I believed we had chosen the right path together. We never had children, a choice we made together, though it carried a quiet ache. It suited our life, traveling the world, advising my father on expanding the eco-resort empire, becoming pillars of Cascadia Bay's philanthropic scene. Desmond aged gracefully, his dark hair turning silver, laugh lines framing those extraordinary amber eyes. At 73, he swam daily, his body still lean and powerful. From our bedroom window, I'd watch him slice through the waves, marveling that this man, so full of life and purpose, had chosen me. Our 50th anniversary was a quiet affair at the Cerulean Room, the bay glowing gold and blue at sunset. Desmond's toast brought tears even to my stoic father's eyes. "To 50 years of exploring the world with you, Thalia," he said, his glass raised. "Through calm seas and storms, there's no one else I'd rather navigate life with." His words wrapped around my heart, a vow renewed. 3 weeks later, everything shattered. I wasn't searching for secrets that day. Desmond was at a conference in Seattle, his expertise still in demand, even in semi-retirement. I decided to organize the garage as a surprise for his return. Behind his workbench, under a tarp, I found a small wooden chest, its intricate carvings unfamiliar. It wasn't locked. Why would it be? We shared everything. Or so I thought. Inside was a locket with a photo of a younger Desmond, his arm around a woman I didn't know. A bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon and birth certificates for 2 children, Eliza and Julian Merrick, born in 1985 and 1908 in Serenity Cove, a town 3 hours south. My hands shook as I studied their photographs. Eliza had Desmond's amber eyes, Julian, his sharp jawline. A Christmas card showed them as adults, with their own families, a note on the back reading, "Visit soon, Dad, we miss you." For hours, I sat on the cold garage floor, surrounded by evidence of a life Desmond had hidden. My mind reeled, unable to reconcile the man who volunteered at the Marine Research Center, who brought me flowers on the anniversary of our first date, who stayed by my side during my father's heart surgery, with this stranger who had fathered children with another woman. As shock gave way to a chilling calm, I kept one item, the Christmas card, and returned the rest to the chest. In our bedroom, I opened my laptop and searched for Serenity Cove. Desmond's name appeared as a founding donor of the Serenity Cove Marine Institute. Newspaper archives showed him at community events, and a recent photo captured him with his arm around a woman at a fundraiser. The caption read, Institute founders Desmond and Valencia Merrick celebrate the center's 30th anniversary. Valencia Merrick, another wife, another life. I stared at Desmond's text that evening. Conference running late. Home tomorrow. Love you. Those words, once a comfort, now felt like a mockery. I didn't cry or rage. Instead, I sat in my reading chair, watching the moon's reflection on the bay, wrestling with a single question. What do you do when 50 years of love reveal 50 years of lies? By morning, my path was clear. I wouldn't confront Desmond yet. I needed the truth in its entirety, unfiltered by his explanations. I needed to meet Valencia Merrick. I dressed simply, removed my wedding ring, the indentation on my finger a haunting reminder, and transferred funds to a private account. Leaving a note about visiting a college friend, I drove to Serenity Cove. The town was quaint, its charm quieter than Cascadia Bay's grandeur. The Serenity Cove Marine Institute stood at the end of the main pier, a sleek structure of glass and timber. I watched from my car as researchers, tourists, and school groups moved about. Around noon, I saw her, Valencia Merrick, tall and striking, her silver-streaked hair in a practical bun, her movements purposeful yet warm. This was the woman who shared my husband, the mother of his children, the architect of his other life. I followed her into the institute where the lobby buzzed with marine conservation displays. The receptionist greeted me warmly. I'd like to speak with Valencia Merrick, I said, my voice steady. I'm an old friend, Thalia, from Briarcliff University. A lie, but it got me through. Minutes later, Valencia appeared, her polite smile tinged with confusion. I'm afraid I don't recall you, she said, her dark eyes assessing me. I'm not from Briarcliff, I said softly. I'm Thalia Merrick, Desmond's wife from Cascadia Bay. Her face paled, and for a moment I thought she might collapse. Then with a glance around the lobby, she whispered, My office, now. Her office overlooked the water, lined with marine biology texts and photos of her with Desmond, their children, their grandchildren, a family I'd never known. She closed the door, leaning against it as if to hold back the truth. This isn't possible, she said, her voice breaking. Desmond and I have been married for 45 years. We sat, two women in their 70s, unraveling the life of the man we both loved. He's away 2 weeks every other month for conferences, Valencia said, her voice hollow. Then home for 6 weeks. I nodded. Same with me. 2 weeks away, 6 weeks home. The ocean outside her window rolled on, indifferent to our shared betrayal. Do you have children? She asked. No, I said. We decided against it. Her bitter smile mirrored my own. How convenient for him. As the afternoon unfolded, we pieced together Desmond's double life. He'd met Valencia shortly after our marriage during a project in Serenity Cove. For decades, he'd balanced 2 families, 2 homes, 2 wives, weaving a web of lies with surgical precision. We sat in silence, the weight of his deception binding us in a strange, painful kinship, wondering how the man we loved could have orchestrated such a betrayal. In the quiet coastal haven of Serenity Cove, I found myself unraveling a life I thought I knew. My heart churned with a mix of disbelief and dawning clarity as I sat across from Valencia, a woman whose existence had been hidden from me for decades. She was not the privileged heiress I was, born into the Ashworth fortune, but a woman of humble origins who had clawed her way through marine biology graduate school with sheer brilliance and grit. Her eyes, lined with the weight of years and recent revelations, told a story of resilience and quiet strength. She spoke of Desmond, the man we both called husband, with a tenderness that stung my heart. He had funded her doctoral research, she said, claiming it came from family money. My family's money, I now realized. He had painted himself as a visionary, developing underwater habitats and needing her expertise. What began as a professional partnership had blossomed into love, culminating in a small seaside wedding 5 years after he had pledged his life to me. Valencia's voice wavered as she described their life together, her words laced with a love that had endured despite Desmond's frequent absences. She never questioned his travels, attributing them to his global work in marine conservation. Her own career at the Marine Institute and the demands of raising their two children, Julian and Eliza, kept her grounded. She gestured to a wall adorned with photographs, each frame capturing Desmond's presence at birthdays, graduations, and holidays. He was always here when it mattered, she said, her voice soft but proud. The children adore him. I thought of my own life in Cascadia Bay, childless by choice, filled with exotic travels in the freedom of a life unencumbered by family ties. Had Desmond orchestrated this duality with surgical precision, crafting two perfect lives that never intersected? The question gnawed at me, a quiet storm of betrayal brewing in my chest. Did you ever suspect? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Valencia shook her head, her silver-streaked hair catching the light. There were moments, small inconsistencies, calls he'd take outside, but 50 years ago there was no way to verify. You just trust. The word trust landed like a stone between us, heavy with irony. I saw the flicker of pain in her eyes, mirroring my own. What could she do now, she asked, her voice small but resolute. I looked at this woman, my rival yet my unexpected ally, and felt a strange bond forged in our shared deception. Desmond had manipulated us both, compartmentalizing his life with a precision that left me breathless. I don't know yet, I admitted, my mind racing, but we should talk to your children, his children, before we decide. She nodded, her expression weary but determined. They're both in town. Julian lives here with his family. Eliza's visiting from Portland with her husband. My heart sank at the thought of shattering their world. Do they know about me? I asked, dreading her answer. No, she said firmly. They believe their father is exactly who he said he was. Leaving the Marine Institute, I felt the ground shift beneath me. The man I had loved for 50 years, whose every quirk I thought I knew, was a stranger. Yet, in that moment, I felt a clarity I hadn't known in decades. I checked into a quaint bed and breakfast by the harbor, requesting a room with an ocean view. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting Serenity Cove in hues of gold and crimson, I thought of the conversation ahead with Valencia and Desmond's children. Their lives were about to fracture, just as mine had. My phone buzzed with 3 missed calls from Desmond and a text. Home now? Where are you? Getting worried. For the first time in our marriage, I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop, my fingers moving with purpose as I began transferring funds and documenting assets. The Ashworth fortune, which had cushioned Desmond's life for decades, would now become my shield. My father's words echoed in my mind. True wealth isn't what you have, it's what you protect. I was ready to protect myself. The next morning, I arrived at Valencia's cedar-shingled home, a modest yet beautiful retreat overlooking the harbor. Wind chimes sang in the sea breeze, a sound Desmond had always called authentic, unlike the ostentatious mansions of Meridian Heights where we lived. The irony was bitter. He had reveled in that opulence while maintaining this idyllic second life. I parked my rental car a block away, the morning fog rolling in like a shroud over the fishing boats. For a fleeting moment, I considered fleeing back to Cascadia Bay, confronting Desmond alone, sparing his other family this pain. But that would be another lie, another betrayal. The truth, however brutal, was the only way forward. Valencia opened the door before I could knock, her face bare of makeup, her eyes red-rimmed from a sleepless night. They'll be here at 10, she said, her voice steady despite the exhaustion etched into her features. I followed her into a sunlit kitchen that smelled of coffee and cinnamon, family photos covering the refrigerator, like a tapestry of Desmond's other life. His arm around Valencia, his children, his familiar smile crinkling his amber eyes, the same smile that greeted me each morning in Cascadia Bay. Did you tell Desmond where you are? She asked, pouring coffee into a handmade mug. No, I replied. He thinks I'm visiting a college friend. You? She handed me the mug. He believes I'm busy with the Institute's gala. He's not due back for a week. We sat at her kitchen table, two women bound by betrayal, sipping coffee as we awaited the next act of this surreal drama. Outside, a hummingbird flitted among the fuchsias, vibrant and free. How will we do this? I asked. Valencia brushed a strand of hair from her face, her weariness palpable. Directly, without emotion if possible, she said, attempting a smile that didn't reach her eyes. At 10, the front door opened, and warm voices filled the entryway. Mom, we're here, called a woman, her tone bright and confident. Valencia stood, smoothing her blouse with trembling hands. In the kitchen, she called back. Julian and Eliza entered, both tall, like their father, carrying his features in distinct ways. Eliza's amber eyes and quick smile mirrored Desmond's. Julian's strong jaw and thoughtful expression were equally familiar. They noticed me immediately, their faces registering polite curiosity. Hello, Eliza said, extending her hand. I'm Eliza Merrick Chen. Are you a colleague of Mom's? I took her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin, seeing Desmond in the angle of her wrist. No, I said gently. I'm Thalia Merrick. I'm married to your father. The silence was deafening. Julian froze halfway into a chair. Eliza's hand went slack before she pulled it away. That's not funny, Julian said, his voice low. Our parents have been married for 45 years. 45 years, 2 months, and 17 days, I confirmed. Your father married Valencia on June 12, 1980. He married me on April 25, 1975. They turned to Valencia expecting denial, but found only quiet resignation. Mom, what is this? Eliza whispered. Valencia gestured for them to sit, and what followed was a conversation none of us were prepared for. We took turns explaining Desmond's dual lives, his meticulously planned absences, the lies that sustained 2 marriages for nearly half a century. Julian paced the kitchen, pausing to study family photos as if they held hidden truths. Eliza sat motionless, tears streaming down her face. This can't be real, she kept saying. Dad wouldn't do this. But he had. I showed them photos from my phone, our home in Cascadia Bay, our 50th anniversary party. Valencia produced Desmond's travel schedule, revealing a perfect alternating pattern between his 2 families. All those consulting trips, Julian said hollowly. They were mostly real, I acknowledged. He built his career around legitimate travel. He just had 2 homes to return to. Why are you here? Eliza asked, her expression hardening. Why tell us this? The question echoed my own sleepless thoughts. Because you deserve the truth, I said, and because I needed to see who else he hurt. Are there other wives? Julian asked, his voice strained. Valencia and I exchanged glances. We don't think so, she said. The pattern wouldn't allow it. Unless he has a 3rd wife who thinks he travels 4 weeks out of 6, I added dryly. Eliza's laugh was half a sob. What happens now? Julian asked. That's why we're here, I said. Whatever we do affects us all. We should decide together. Valencia nodded. Thalia and I are both legally married to Desmond. In both states, my marriage is invalid. No, I interrupted. Your marriage produced children, grandchildren. Mine created only shared memories. Morally, your claim is stronger. Eliza's eyes widened. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone angrier, someone looking to take everything. I smiled sadly. I'm 73, Eliza. Anger seems beside the point now. The conversation stretched into the afternoon, moving to the living room as we ordered takeout, barely tasting it. Julian's hostility softened. Eliza's tears gave way to questions. A plan began to form. We're agreed, Valencia said. No one confronts Desmond until we're ready to do it together. I added, I'll begin the financial arrangements we discussed. Julian leaned forward. Are you sure, Thalia? You don't know us. I know enough, I replied. Your father's deception shouldn't define your future. As I left, Eliza walked me to my car. Why didn't you have children with Dad? She asked. We decided our lifestyle wasn't suited for it, I said. Travel, careers. Did you want them? I paused. Sometimes. But Desmond was certain it wasn't for us. Of course, she said quietly. He already had us. I squeezed her hand. He was lucky to have you. She nodded, blinking back tears. That evening, I called my attorney and financial advisor, outlining changes to my estate and investments. I texted Desmond, extended my visit, friend needs support. We'll talk when I'm home. His reply was quick. Take your time. Everything okay here, miss you. I stared at those words, wondering if he'd sent the same to Valencia. The thought didn't anger me. It left me detached, as if observing someone else's life. Over the next 3 days, I met with Valencia and her children, planning our confrontation. I walked Serenity Cove's harbor, its weathered boats and lively community, a stark contrast to Cascadia Bay's polished affluence. On my final evening, Valencia invited me to dinner. We ate grilled fish on her porch, the harbor glinting below. The clink of silverware mingled with the distant call of gulls, and for a moment we were just two women sharing a meal, bound by a truth that had changed everything. The gentle lapping of waves against the boats in the harbor was the only sound that filled the air, a soft, rhythmic backdrop to the weight of our unspoken thoughts. Valencia broke the silence first, her voice steady but tinged with a quiet vulnerability as she reached for the wine bottle. You know, she said, pouring a deep ruby stream into our glasses, in some other life, I think we could have been friends. Her words hung between us, fragile yet heavy, like a bridge built from threads of shared pain. I let the idea settle, turning it over in my mind as I gazed out at the water, its surface catching the fading gold of the sunset. Friends? Perhaps. But beneath that possibility lay a truth I couldn't ignore. We were carved from different stone, shaped by lives that diverged in ways both subtle and stark. Maybe, I said at last, my voice soft but honest, though I suspect we're very different women. Are we, though? Valencia countered, her eyes meeting mine with a quiet challenge. Think about it. We both poured our lives into careers that help others. We both carved out our independence, fought for it, and, she paused, her fingers tightening briefly around her glass, we both fell in love with the same impossible man. Her words landed like a stone in still water, ripples spreading through the silence. A smile tugged at my lips despite myself, born not of joy but of recognition. The truth in her words was undeniable, a thread that wove our lives together in ways I hadn't fully grasped until now. When you put it that way, I murmured, my voice trailing off as I considered her next question, one that cut deeper than I expected. Did he make you happy? She asked, her gaze unflinching, searching my face for an answer that felt as raw as the question itself. The question deserved more than a quick reply. I took a slow sip of wine, letting its warmth spread through me as I watched the last rays of sunlight dance across the harbor. My mind drifted to Desmond, to the man who had been the center of my world for half a century. Yes, I said finally, the word carrying a weight I hadn't anticipated. Not perfectly, not always consistently, but genuinely. The admission felt like peeling back a layer of my heart, exposing something tender and bruised but still alive. There had been joy, of course, moments so vivid they still glowed in my memory. Desmond's laughter, rich and unguarded when we danced in the kitchen to no music at all. His curiosity, the way he'd listen to my thoughts as if they were the most fascinating thing he'd ever heard. But there were shadows too, his long absences, weeks where he'd vanish into his work, leaving me to fill the silence with my own routines. And when he returned, there was often a melancholy that clung to him, a quiet distance I could never quite bridge. I'd learned to accept it, to love him through it. But now, knowing what I knew, those absences took on a darker hue. I know exactly what you mean, Valencia said, her voice barely above a whisper. Her eyes softened, and for a moment I saw the weight she carried, the same ache I'd felt so many times. When he's here, it's like the world comes alive. Colors are brighter, sounds are clearer, everything feels possible. She looked down at her glass, her thumb tracing the rim as if searching for answers in its curves. We fell silent again, two women bound by the strange intimacy of loving the same man, of knowing the contours of his heart in ways no one else could. The harbor's gentle rhythm seemed to mirror the quiet understanding growing between us, a connection forged not in friendship but in shared truth. Then abruptly, Valencia's voice cut through the stillness. "Do you hate me?" she asked, her words raw, her eyes locked on mine as if bracing for a blow. "No," I replied, without hesitation, the certainty in my voice surprising even me. "How could I? You're as much a victim of this as I am." The words felt like a release, a truth I hadn't fully articulated until now. Valencia's shoulders, tense and squared, softened slightly, a subtle shift that spoke volumes. "But I'm the second wife," she said, her voice cracking just enough to reveal the guilt she'd been carrying. "The other woman." "Not by choice," I said firmly, shaking my head. "You didn't know. You didn't choose this. Desmond built this deception, not you." My words seemed to lift a weight from her posture easing as if she'd been holding her breath for years. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't know how much that means." As the evening deepened into night, the conversation shifted, moving away from Desmond and toward the lives we'd built despite him. Valencia spoke of her childhood in a fishing family, the salt and sea woven into her earliest memories. She described the relentless determination that had driven her to become a marine biologist, the late nights studying by lantern light when her family couldn't afford electricity, the scholarships and grants that had been her lifeline. Her voice carried a quiet pride, a resilience that made her story feel like a triumph over the odds. I shared my own journey, one shaped by the privileges and pressures of wealth. The Ashworth name had opened doors, but it had also come with expectations, a gilded cage I'd spent my life breaking free from. I spoke of my parents' complex legacy, generous yet controlling, loving yet distant, and my determination to build something meaningful, something that was mine. The family foundation, the wellness center, the causes I championed. They were my rebellion against a life of idle wealth, my way of leaving a mark that mattered. By the time I left, something had shifted between us. Not friendship, not exactly, but a mutual respect, a recognition of the strength we'd each summoned in the face of betrayal. We were two women who had loved deeply, built fiercely, and now stood on the precipice of an uncertain future, united by a shared resolve to reclaim our truths. The next morning I checked out of the bed and breakfast, my suitcase packed with the weight of decisions made and plans set in motion. The drive back to Cascadia Bay stretched before me, the coastal highway winding alongside cliffs that dropped sharply to the sea below. With the windows down, I let the salt air fill the car, sharp and bracing, clearing the fog of the past few days. For the first time in years, my thoughts turned not to the life I'd lived for 50 years, but to the future. Uncharted, uncertain, yet pulsing with possibility. When I arrived home, Desmond was waiting on the porch, a book open on his lap, his reading glasses perched low on his nose. He looked up as we pulled into the driveway, his face breaking into a smile that had once been my anchor. "There she is," he called, marking his page and standing to help with my bag. "I was starting to think you'd forgotten your way home." "Never," I replied, letting him pull me into an embrace, feeling the familiar warmth of his body against mine. How strange it was that he still felt like home, even now when everything I believed about us had shattered. "How's Patricia?" he asked, referencing the friend I'd supposedly been visiting. I spun a detailed story of her fictional marital troubles, each word a careful construction, a lie layered upon lie. As I spoke, I wondered if this was how it had felt for Desmond all these years. This constant editing of reality, this meticulous crafting of a narrative that held just enough raw truth to pass muster. "Poor thing," Desmond said, his voice warm with sympathy for a woman who didn't exist. "Some people just aren't built for the long haul of marriage." The irony nearly made me laugh, but I managed a solemn nod instead. "Tea?" he offered, heading toward the kitchen. "Please," I said, then unable to resist, added, "You know, I drove through the most charming little town on my way back. Serenity Cove. Have you ever been?" I watched him closely, noting the infinitesimal pause in his movements, the slight stiffening of his shoulders before he reached for the kettle. "Serenity Cove," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "The name sounds vaguely familiar. Might have passed through once for work. Small fishing village, isn't it?" 50 years of marriage had taught me his tells, the way he tugged at his earlobe when stretching the truth, the subtle shift in his voice when he was building a story rather than recalling a memory. They were all there now, so familiar I wondered how I'd never seen them for what they were. It's grown quite a bit, I said, keeping my voice light. There's a Marine Research Institute there now, very impressive facilities. He turned to face me, his expression pleasant but guarded, a mask I now recognized. Is that so? Well, maybe we should visit sometime. You know how I love anything marine-related. I nodded, smiling as if the idea thrilled me. I'd like that. It seemed like the kind of place you'd enjoy. For the next 3 days, we slipped back into our routines. Desmond worked in his home office, consulted with colleagues via video calls, and joined me for meals where we discussed books, current events, and plans for the garden. I attended board meetings for the Family Foundation, visited the Wellness Center, and met friends for lunch, all while maintaining a facade of normalcy. At night, I lay beside the man I'd married, listening to his steady breathing, wondering if he dreamed of his other life, his other wife, his children, his grandchildren. The intimacy we'd shared for 50 years, physical, emotional, intellectual, now felt like a performance, a dance where only one of us knew the music. On the fourth morning, a text from Valencia. He's booked his usual flight for next Tuesday, everything proceeding as planned. I deleted it immediately and continued preparing breakfast. Desmond wandered into the kitchen, his hair still damp from the shower, and wrapped his arms around me from behind, a gesture that had once felt like love, but now felt like a habit. What would you think about a trip? He murmured against my neck. Maybe the Greek islands. We haven't been back since our 40th anniversary. Another escape, another carefully timed distraction. That sounds wonderful, I said, turning to face him, but I was thinking of something closer to home first. I have a business in Serenity Cove next week. Why don't you come with me? Alarm flashed across his face, raw and unguarded, before he could suppress it. Serenity Cove? He said, his voice tight. What business could you possibly have there? The Ashworth Foundation is considering funding their marine conservation programs. I improvised, watching him closely. I thought you might enjoy seeing their work, given your expertise. He stepped back, running a hand through his silver hair, another telltale sign of anxiety. Next week might be tough, he said, his voice too casual. I've got a conference in Boston, remember? Oh, of course, I said as if I'd forgotten. When do you leave again? Tuesday morning, back the following week. I nodded thoughtfully. Well, maybe another time then. He relaxed visibly, the tension easing from his frame. Definitely, maybe after Boston. The weekend passed in a haze of domestic tranquility. On Saturday, we attended a gallery opening for a local artist, mingling with acquaintances who remarked on how well we looked, how enviable our relationship remained after all these years. On Sunday, we walked along the bay, Desmond pointing out technical details of passing sailboats, his knowledge still impressive after decades in the field. If I hadn't known the truth, I'd have believed in the life we presented. A devoted couple, aging gracefully, still deeply connected. It was a fiction, a beautiful lie crafted over half a century. Monday morning, I met with my attorney, Elena Vasquez, to sign the documents she'd prepared. She watched with professional concern. Are you certain about these changes, Thalia? She asked. They're significant. I've never been more certain, I assured her. The foundation will continue its work, my affairs will be in order, and certain inequities will be addressed. And Desmond? She pressed. Is he aware? He will be, I said simply. Very soon. By the time I returned home, Desmond had finished packing. His suitcase stood by the door, his travel documents neatly arranged. He was in his study, making notes on a presentation he'd supposedly deliver in Boston. All set for tomorrow? I asked, leaning against the door frame. Just about, he said, looking up with a distracted smile. Early flight, so I'll need to leave by 6. Want me to drive you? No need to disrupt your morning, he said, smiling. I've arranged a car. Of course he had. Desmond always drove himself to the airport for his fictional conferences, picking up a rental car to drive not to Boston, but to Serenity Cove, where Valencia would believe he was returning from legitimate business. Well then, I said softly, I suppose we should have a proper goodbye. I crossed the room and perched on his desk, a gesture I'd done countless times. He set aside his papers, taking my hands in his expression tender. "It's only a week, my dear. I'll be back before you know it." "Will you?" I asked, studying his face, the face I'd woken up to for 50 years, now a face that lied with ease. He tilted his head, puzzled by my tone. "Of course," he said. "Don't I always come back to you?" I smiled, gently pulling my hands free. "Until tomorrow, then." That night, as he slept beside me for what I knew would be the last time, I lay awake, moonlight patterning the ceiling. I thought about my younger self, so certain of her choices, so confident in love. Love, I thought about the Valencia, who'd built a life of purpose despite the same betrayal. I thought about the Eliza and Julian, who'd soon face a father they'd thought they'd known. And I thought about Desmond, the man who'd somehow convinced himself that splitting his life in two was love, not betrayal. Had he ever weighed on him the magnitude of his deception? Or had he compartmentalized so perfectly that each life felt whole, justified, complete? Morning arrived with a sharp clarity. I watched Desmond from the doorway as he moved through his routine, checking his wallet, securing his watch, adjusting his collar in the mirror. Each gesture was familiar, yet now layered with deceit. "You're up early," he remarked, catching my reflection. "Couldn't sleep?" "Just wanted to see you off," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Have a productive conference." He turned, smiling, his amber eyes crinkling. "I'll call when I land in Boston." Another lie delivered with perfect sincerity. He'd call, yes, but from a rental car heading north to Serenity Cove. "Safe travels," I said, accepting his kiss, breathing in his aftershave. Sandalwood and citrus, a scent I'd given him decades ago. I stood at the window, watching as the car service arrived, as Desmond loaded his suitcase, gave a final wave, and slid into the back seat. The sun caught his silver hair, a fleeting halo. Even now I could see his handsomeness, the grace of his bearing. Once the car was gone, I moved with purpose. A call to my assistant, explaining I'd be away on family business. A text to Valencia, confirming Desmond's departure. Then I retrieved my suitcase from the guest room closet and walked through our home one last time. The nautical maps, the telescope, the kitchen where we'd cooked together, the bedroom where I'd loved him. On impulse, I took a navy cardigan from his closet, a keepsake of a life that had been both real and illusory. At 8:30, I locked the door and drove, the coastal highway stretching ahead. I'd chosen to drive to Serenity Cove, needing the solitude to prepare. Would we pass each other on this road? Desmond and I, two cars bound for the same truth? The thought sent a strange thrill through me, not fear but inevitability. My phone rang. Valencia. "Good morning," and I answered, merging onto the highway, the sea gleaming beside me, and the future, uncertain but vibrant, unfolding with every mile. As I gripped the steering wheel, the hands-free system hummed softly in the background, a stark contrast to the storm brewing within me. I had just left Cascadia Bay, the coastal town where my life with Desmond had unfolded over decades, each moment now tinged with the bitter aftertaste of betrayal. 10 minutes earlier, Valencia's voice had crackled through the line, steady but heavy with unspoken weight. "He called," she said, cutting straight to the point. "His flight's boarding, he says. He'll see me tomorrow evening." I nodded to myself, the rhythm of her words syncing with the pulse of my own resolve. "Right on schedule," I replied, my voice betraying none of the turmoil beneath. Desmond had told me something similar, though his version swapped her name for a conference, and tomorrow evening for next week. A seamless lie, delivered with the ease of a man who had perfected deception over a lifetime. The silence that followed was thick, a shared moment of reckoning hanging between us. Valencia broke it first, her voice softer now, tinged with hesitation. "Are you certain about this, Thalia? It's not too late to back out." Her question hit me like a wave, pulling me under for a moment. Was I certain? For the past week, meticulous planning had shielded me from the raw emotional reality of what we were orchestrating. Every detail, timelines, locations, contingencies, had been a buffer, a way to keep the pain at arm's length. But now, alone on this endless highway with the Pacific stretching out to my left, doubt began to seep into the cracks of my determination. The road ahead offered no distractions, just miles of open space for my thoughts to spiral. Could I really go through with this? Could I face Desmond, the man I loved for 50 years, and dismantle the life we'd built together? I'm certain I can't keep living a lie, I said at last, my voice steadier than I felt. Beyond that, I'm just making it up as I go, like everyone else. The words felt like a confession, raw and unpolished, but they were the truth. I wasn't a hero or a mastermind. I was just a woman trying to claw her way out of a betrayal that had reshaped her past. Valencia's voice came through again, quieter now, carrying the weight of her own grief. Julian and Eliza arrived last night. They've been looking through old photo albums. It's hard. I could picture it vividly. Two grown children, Julian with his father's sharp jawline, Eliza with her mother's thoughtful eyes, sitting in Valencia's living room, flipping through memories now tainted by the truth. Every snapshot, every birthday, every holiday captured in those albums must feel like a lie now, a carefully curated fiction. I imagine Julian's anger simmering, his fists clenched as he questioned every moment he thought he'd known his father. Eliza, I pictured, would be quieter, her questions sharp and probing, each one a desperate attempt to piece together a narrative that made sense. "How are they holding up?" I asked, my heart aching for them, strangers bound to me by this shared wound. "As well as you'd expect," Valencia replied. Julian's furious, keeps pacing, snapping at small things. Eliza's asking questions I don't have answers for, questions I'm not sure I want to face. Her words hung heavy, and I felt the weight of her exhaustion, her struggle to hold her family together while grappling with her own shattered illusions. "We'll have answers soon enough," I said, forcing confidence into my tone, though it felt hollow, or at least confrontations. "Yes," Valencia murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "Everything's set for tomorrow afternoon. The conference room at the Institute is reserved. Private entrance. No interruptions." "Perfect," I said, my mind already mapping out the logistics. "I'll be there by late afternoon. Checking into the Harborview Inn as planned." "Thalia," Valencia said suddenly, her voice dropping to a near whisper, as if the words were too fragile to speak loudly. What if he doesn't show? The question landed like a stone in my chest, stirring up a fear we hadn't dared voice before. What if Desmond sensed the trap? What if he chose to vanish, to abandon both lives rather than face the consequences of his double existence? The possibility gnawed at me, threatening to unravel the certainty I'd been clinging to. "He'll show," I replied, surprised by the conviction in my voice. "Desmond's many things, but he's not a coward, and he believes his secret's still safe." It was true, his arrogance, his unshakable belief in his own cleverness, would be his undoing. He had no reason to suspect that Valencia and I had connected, that we'd pieced together the elaborate web of lies he'd spun for decades. After we hung up, I let the rhythm of the drive take over, the hum of the engine blending with the crash of waves against the cliffs outside my window. The highway traced the coastline, each curve revealing a new vista, towering cliffs, pristine beaches, the vast, unyielding Pacific stretching to the horizon. On another day, I might have pulled over, let the beauty of it wash over me. I might have called Desmond, my voice bright with excitement, describing the way the sunlight danced on the water, or the way the cliffs seemed to hold secrets of their own. How many times had we done that over the years? Walked hand in hand along the shore at dusk, shared impromptu picnics on coastal bluffs, watched storms roll in from the safety of a seaside cafe. Those moments had felt so real, so achingly true. But now, as the miles slipped by, I wondered, had they been genuine, or were they just scenes in the carefully staged play of our marriage? The question haunted me, twisting in my mind like a thorn. The experiences themselves, the sunsets, the laughter, the quiet moments of connection, had been real. I could still feel the warmth of Desmond's hand in mine, hear the cadence of his voice as he spun stories about our future. But the context was a lie, a betrayal woven into the foundation of every memory. He hadn't just shared those moments with me. He'd replicated them with Valencia, with her children, in a parallel life I'd never suspected. The realization didn't erase the beauty of those moments, but it tainted them, casting a shadow that made me question everything I thought I knew about love, trust, and truth. By early afternoon, I was nearing Serenity Cove, the small coastal town where Valencia had built her life. and where Desmond had built his second one. I pulled into a roadside diner, craving a moment of normalcy before the storm to come. As I sat at the counter, stirring my coffee absently, I watched fishing boats bob on the horizon, their movements steady and unhurried. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a weathered smile, refilled my cup with a practiced ease. "Just passing through or staying a while?" she asked, her voice warm with curiosity. "A few days," I said, forcing a smile. "Meeting family." The word felt strange on my tongue, heavy with irony. Family, yes, but not in the way she'd assume. "First time in Serenity Cove?" she asked, wiping down the counter with a rag. I hesitated, an odd reluctance to lie to this stranger washing over me. "Second visit, actually. I was here briefly last week." She nodded, her smile widening. "People always come back. This place has a way of getting under your skin." She gestured toward the window where the harbor sparkled under the afternoon sun. "Not flashy like some coastal towns, but real, you know?" I did know. Even in my short time here, I'd sensed the authenticity Valencia had described, a community rooted in something deeper than wealth or status. "Are you from here originally?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Born and raised," she said proudly. "Left for a decade in my 20s chasing something bigger, more exciting. Came back when I realized what I was missing." "And what was that?" I asked, leaning forward despite myself. She paused, tucking a strand of gray hair behind her ear, her expression thoughtful. "Rootedness, I suppose. A place where your history walks with you every day." She smiled, nodding toward an elderly man shuffling into the diner. "Like Earl there. He taught me to sail when I was 8. Now I'm teaching his granddaughter. That kind of continuity, it matters." Her words stayed with me as I continued my drive into Serenity Cove, lingering like the salt in the air. Rootedness, continuity. In Cascadia Bay, I had a version of that. My family's name, Ashworth, carried weight, opened doors, ensured a certain kind of belonging. But it wasn't the same as what the waitress described, that organic connection woven through generations. Had Desmond been searching for that when he created his second family? The thought unsettled me, but I couldn't dismiss it entirely. Our decision not to have children had been mutual, or so I thought. But now, looking back, I wondered if he'd simply agreed to keep the peace, burying desires that later found expression in Serenity Cove. A wife, children, grandchildren, a community that embraced him as one of their own. Had that been his attempt to fill a void I hadn't seen? The Harbor View Inn came into view, a charming Victorian building perched above the marina, its blue-gray clapboard weathered but lovingly maintained. The lobby was warm and inviting, filled with maritime artifacts and plush seating arranged to capture the harbor's beauty. I checked in under my own name, waving off the young receptionist's offer to help with my bags. My third-floor room offered a sweeping view of the marina, fishing boats gliding in with their catch, seagulls soaring above the docks, and in the distance, the sleek glass and timber structure of the Serenity Cove Marine Institute, where tomorrow's confrontation would unfold. After unpacking, I texted Valencia to confirm my arrival. Her reply was prompt. "Dinner at my house, 7 p.m., just us." I accepted, a mix of curiosity and apprehension swirling in my chest. Valencia was an enigma, a woman who shared my husband yet refused to play the victim. Her directness, her refusal to crumble under the weight of Desmond's betrayal, had earned my respect, even as it deepened my own sense of disorientation. As I freshened up, my phone chimed again, Desmond's name flashing on the screen. My heart stuttered, a jolt of adrenaline coursing through me. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but that would only raise suspicions. "Hello," I said, forcing a casual tone. "Just landed in Boston." Desmond's voice came through, warm and familiar, as if nothing in the world was amiss. "Thought I'd check in before heading to the hotel." Another lie, delivered with the ease of a man who'd spent decades perfecting the art. He wasn't in Boston. He was likely driving north, perhaps only an hour from Serenity Cove, spinning stories as effortlessly as ever. "How was the flight?" I asked, playing along, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "Smooth enough. A bit of turbulence over the Midwest, but nothing serious. No flight, no turbulence, just a man in a rental car weaving fiction with practiced ease. "I'm glad you arrived safely," I said, the irony bitter on my tongue. "Have a good evening." "You too, love. What are your plans tonight?" For a fleeting moment, I wanted to tell him the truth. "I'm having dinner with your other wife to plan your downfall." Instead, I spun my own lie, the words tasting like ash. "Just a quiet night in. Might finish that novel I've been reading." "Perfect. Get some rest. I'll call tomorrow." When the call ended, I sat on the edge of the bed, my phone still in hand, a strange numbness spreading through me. 50 years of calls like that, 50 years of casual deceptions woven into the fabric of our marriage. How had I never seen it? Had I been blind? Or had Desmond simply been that good at hiding the truth? The question lingered unanswered as I prepared for dinner. Valencia's cedar-shingled house was as warm and unpretentious as she was, the evening breeze carrying the scent of salt and jasmine. She opened the door in a simple linen dress, her silver-streaked hair pulled back loosely, her presence radiating a quiet dignity. "Welcome back," she said, gesturing me inside. "I've opened a bottle of wine if you'd like some." "That would be lovely," I replied, following her to the kitchen. The air was rich with the aroma of a seafood stew, ciopino, she later told me, simmering on the stove. A salad of local greens and crusty bread sat on the counter, a testament to her understated hospitality. "Hope you like seafood," she said, ladling the fragrant stew into bowls. "It's a specialty here." "It smells wonderful," I said sincerely. Desmond loves seafood too. The mention of his name hung between us, an awkward pause settling over the room. Valencia handed me a glass of crisp white wine, her expression thoughtful. "It's strange, isn't it? Sharing these parallel lives with the same man." I nodded, taking a sip. "Like we've been living in adjacent universes that just collided." "Exactly." She carried our bowls to the porch where the setting sun painted the harbor in shades of gold and amber. "Julian asked me today if I thought Desmond loved us both equally, as if that would make it hurt less." "What did you tell him?" I asked, settling into a chair. "That love isn't something you can measure," she said, her voice steady but laced with pain. "Whatever Desmond felt for either of us was tangled up in his lies. In the end, the betrayal overshadows everything else." "Wise answer," I murmured. "Not wise enough to see through him for 45 years, she said with a wry smile. We ate in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the clink of spoons and the distant cry of seagulls. The stew was exquisite, a rich blend of tomatoes, wine, and fresh seafood that spoke of local traditions. "Did you make this?" I asked. Valencia nodded. "My father's recipe. He was a fisherman before arthritis took him off the water. Taught me everything about choosing and preparing seafood." "It's incredible," I said. "In another life, you could have been a chef." She smiled, the compliment softening her expression. "In another life, maybe, but I've never regretted my choices. Marine biology, motherhood, this town." She paused, swirling her wine. "Just my choice of husband." "Same," I admitted, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "Though I wonder sometimes if I'd have done more without Desmond's shadow." "It's easy to get comfortable when you think you have everything." "And now?" Valencia asked, her gaze piercing. "What do you want now?" The question caught me off guard, forcing me to confront the uncertainty I'd been avoiding. "Revenge? Justice? Freedom?" "Closure, I suppose," I said finally. "And then, space to figure out what's next. I'm 73, not dead. There might still be adventures waiting." Valencia raised her glass. "To unexpected new chapters." I clinked my glass against hers. "And to facing the truth, no matter how painful." As the sky darkened and stars began to speckle the harbor, our conversation shifted away from Desmond. Valencia spoke of her early days studying kelp forests, fighting for respect in a male-dominated field, and building the Marine Institute that now stood as her legacy. I shared my own journey, launching the Luminina Wellness Center, navigating the expectations of the Ashworth family, finding purpose beyond wealth. By the time I left at 10, I felt a surprising bond to this woman who should have been my rival. We weren't friends, not exactly, but we shared a quiet resolve to reclaim our dignity from the wreckage of Desmond's lies. Back at the Harbor View Inn, sleep eluded me. Tomorrow, Desmond would arrive, expecting to slip effortlessly into a second life. Instead, he'd face the collapse of both worlds. What would that moment feel like? How would he justify the unjustifiable? What would remain when his carefully constructed lies crumbled? The questions kept me awake, circling like vultures. Morning brought no clarity, only a surreal anticipation that made mundane tasks, showering, dressing, ordering breakfast, feel like scenes from someone else's life. I chose my outfit with care, a navy dress, simple but elegant, minimal jewelry, comfortable shoes. This wasn't a day for flash or distraction. At 11, my phone chimed with a text from Desmond. Busy morning of sessions, thinking of you, hope your day's pleasant. Another lie, another performance. I replied with equal falseness. Enjoy the conference. All quiet here. Just after noon, Valencia texted. He called, arriving around 3 p.m. Meeting set for 4 at the Institute. Julian and Eliza will be there. This was it, the moment when 50 years of deception would collide. I replied simply, I'll be there. I spent the next few hours walking along the harbor, watching Serenity Cove go about its day. Fishermen unloaded their catch. Shopkeepers arranged displays. Children laughed as they fed gulls on the pier. Life moved on, oblivious to the personal earthquake looming. At 3:30, I headed to the Serenity Cove Marine Institute, entering through a side door as Valencia had instructed. A young assistant led me to a conference room where Valencia, Julian, and Eliza waited, the air thick with tension. Julian paced by the windows, his movements echoing Desmond's restless energy. Eliza sat at the table, her fingers tapping erratically, her face pale but resolute. Valencia stood by a credenza, her composed expression masking the strain beneath. He's on his way, she said as I entered. Called from the rental car 20 minutes ago. Julian spun from the window, his face tight with anger. Are we really doing this? Ambushing him like this? What's the alternative? Eliza snapped, her voice sharp with frustration. A cozy family dinner where we casually mention he's been living a double life for 50 years? I'm just saying there might be a way to let him keep some dignity, Julian argued, his voice breaking. Dignity? Eliza's tone was incredulous. He gave that up when he decided to juggle 2 families for decades. Valencia stepped forward, resting a hand on Julian's arm. I understand, Julian, but this isn't an ambush. It's a reckoning. Your father's choices hurt us all. We deserve to face him together, to hear whatever he has to say. Julian fell silent, his expression still conflicted, as the weight of the moment settled over us all. The stage was set, the players in place. In less than an hour, Desmond would walk through that door, and the truth would finally come to light. The conference room felt like a pressure cooker, the air thick with unspoken accusations and the weight of a truth none of us had ever anticipated facing. I settled into a chair at the polished oak table, deliberately choosing a spot that gave me a clear view of the door and the faces of everyone in the room. My hands rested lightly on the table's edge, but inside my heart churned with a mix of dread and resolve. 50 years of marriage, a lifetime of trust, had unraveled in the span of days, and now we were here, waiting for Desmond to walk through that door. Do we have a strategy for how this is going to unfold? I asked, my voice cutting through the heavy silence. Practicality was my anchor, a way to tether myself to something solid amid the emotional storm raging inside me. Valencia, seated across from me, nodded, her expression calm, but her eyes betraying a flicker of apprehension. I'll start, she said, her voice steady, authoritative, as befitting the director of the Serenity Cove Institute. He's expecting to see me, so it makes sense for me to break the ice. Then Thalia, you could speak, and after that the children, Julian and Eliza, if they feel ready. Her plan was simple, structured, but she paused, her fingers tightening slightly around the pen she held. Beyond that, we need to stay adaptable. This is uncharted territory for all of us. Her words hung in the air, a quiet acknowledgement of the surreal reality we were about to confront. The room fell silent again. The only sounds the faint hum of the Institute's daily operations filtering through the closed door, phones ringing softly, footsteps echoing in distant hallways. I glanced at the walls, where framed photographs of vibrant coral reefs and serene ocean depths lined the space, each a testament to Desmond's contributions to marine research. The plaques beneath them, engraved with his name, felt like mocking reminders of the man I thought I knew. Every tick of the clock seemed to amplify the tension, stretching time into an unbearable tautness. My mind wandered to the past, to the countless moments I'd looked at Desmond and seen only love, trust, a shared life. Now those memories felt like fragments of a dream, tainted by the truth I'd uncovered. At exactly 4:05, the sound of footsteps in the hallway snapped us all to attention. My breath caught, and I saw Julian and Eliza stiffen in their seats, their eyes locked on the door. A soft knock, then the handle turned, and Desmond Merrick, my husband of half a century, stepped into the room. He was, as always, impeccably dressed, linen trousers pressed to perfection, a light sweater draped over a crisp button-down, loafers polished despite their well-worn tread. His silver hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd been caught in a coastal breeze, and his amber eyes sparkled with warmth as they landed on Valencia. "Sorry I'm a few minutes late," he began, his voice carrying the easy charm I'd once adored. "Traffic was—" His words died mid-sentence as his gaze swept the room, taking in Julian and Eliza before settling on me. The color drained from his face, leaving his tan skin ashen, his expression frozen in a moment of pure shock. For what felt like an eternity, he stood rooted to the spot, one hand still gripping the door handle as if it were a lifeline, as if he might turn and flee from the reality confronting him. My heart pounded, a mix of anger, betrayal, and a strange aching sadness. This was the man I'd loved, the man I'd built a life with, and now he stood before me, exposed as a stranger. "Thalia," he finally whispered, my name barely audible, a fragile thread of sound. "What are you doing here?" The question was so inadequate, so absurdly small compared to the magnitude of the moment, that it might have been laughable in another context. Instead, it only underscored the bizarre, almost dreamlike quality of the situation. "Hello, Desmond," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. Inside, I was a storm of emotions. Rage at his deception, grief for the life I thought we'd shared, and a stubborn determination to face this head on. I think we're all here for the same reason: to understand how you managed to live two separate lives for 50 years without either family suspecting a thing. His eyes darted between Valencia and me, then to Julian and Eliza, his mind clearly racing, calculating, searching for an escape or a strategy. It was a look I recognized from countless moments over the years. Desmond, the problem solver, the man who could navigate any challenge with calm precision. But this time there was an edge of desperation in his gaze, a crack in the facade he'd maintained for decades. "I can explain," he started, then stopped, as if realizing how hollow those words sounded in the face of such a betrayal. "Can you?" Valencia's voice was quiet, but it carried a weight that silenced the room. "Can you really explain deceiving two women for nearly half a century? Building a family with one, while telling the other you didn't want children? Constructing two entirely separate lives in towns just hours apart?" Her words were measured, but the pain beneath them was unmistakable. A raw wound she was forcing herself to confront. Desmond closed the door behind him, the soft click resonating like a gavel in a courtroom, sealing us into this moment of reckoning. He moved into the room, his steps unsteady, as if the ground beneath him had shifted. He stopped several feet from the table, maintaining a careful distance from us all, as though physical proximity might burn him. "I never meant to hurt anyone, he said, his voice laced with a sincerity that felt almost insulting in its inadequacy. The words rang hollow, a feeble defense against the devastation he'd caused. "Hurt?" Julian's voice cut through the air, tight with barely controlled anger. He leaned forward, his hands clenched into fists on the table. "You didn't just hurt us, Dad. You betrayed us. You made us question every memory, every story, every moment we thought was real. How do you even begin to justify that?" His eyes, so like his father's, burned with a mix of pain and fury, and I could see the weight of a lifetime of trust crumbling in his expression. Desmond turned to his son, his face crumpling with visible pain. "Julian, please," he said, his voice breaking. "You have to believe me. Everything I shared with you, with Eliza, with your mother, it was real. My love for you all is real, The words were desperate, pleading, but they only seemed to deepen the wound. And what about your love for Thalia? Eliza demanded, her voice sharp, cutting through the room like a blade. She leaned forward, her knuckles white as she gripped the armrests of her chair. Was that real too? How does that work, Dad? Loving two women at the same time while lying to both of them? Her voice trembled, not with weakness, but with the raw vulnerability of a daughter confronting the unraveling of her entire understanding of her father. Desmond's shoulders slumped, the confident posture that had defined him for decades collapsing under the weight of his deception. He looked suddenly older, smaller, as if the years of lies had physically diminished him. Please, he said, gesturing toward the chairs with a vague, almost helpless motion. Can I sit? This isn't a conversation I ever imagined having, but if we're going to do this, maybe we can all sit down. It was such a Desmond thing to say, always trying to impose order, to make even the most chaotic moments feel civilized. Despite everything, I found myself nodding, and the others followed, settling into chairs around the table like reluctant participants in a board meeting from hell. As Desmond took a seat across from me, our eyes met across the gleaming expanse of the table. For 50 years, I'd looked into those amber eyes, believing I knew the man behind them, his dreams, his fears, his heart. Now I searched for some trace of the truth, for the person who could orchestrate such an elaborate deception, who could share my bed and another woman's with equal devotion. My chest ached with the betrayal, but there was a part of me, small and stubborn, that still wanted to understand. I'm listening, Desmond, I said quietly. We all are. If you can explain, now's the time. He drew a deep breath, his gaze moving from face to face, lingering on each of us as if trying to memorize us, as if he feared this might be the last time he'd see us. Then, with a resignation that seemed to settle over him like a heavy cloak, he began to speak. I never planned for any of this to happen, he said, his voice low, almost confessional. His hands, trembling slightly, pressed flat against the table, as if anchoring himself to something solid. It started innocently enough. Thalia and I had been married for 5 years when I came to Serenity Cove for a research project. The marine ecosystems here were largely unstudied at the time, and the data was critical for a habitat restoration program I was leading. He glanced at Valencia, whose face remained a mask of controlled neutrality. I met Valencia at the University Extension Office. Buried in data and conservation reports, she was brilliant, passionate about marine life in a way that felt rare, almost electric. We worked together for weeks before things shifted between us. Before you decided to seduce her while hiding the fact that you had a wife, I interjected, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. The words cut, and I saw Desmond wince, but he didn't deny it. I told myself it was temporary, he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. A fleeting connection that would end when the project did. But then, he hesitated, his eyes flickering to Valencia. But then you found out I was pregnant, Valencia finished for him, her tone clinical as if she were dissecting a specimen rather than her own life. Julian shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his jaw tight, while Eliza's hands clenched tighter, her knuckles stark against the wood. Yes, Desmond said, his gaze dropping to the table. When Valencia told me about the pregnancy, I panicked. I should have been honest then, with both of you. Instead, I convinced myself there was another way, a way to keep both lives, to avoid hurting anyone. A way to keep both women, both families, both identities, I said, my voice cold, each word a deliberate accusation. How convenient for you. Desmond looked up, meeting my eyes for the first time since entering the room. There was pain in his gaze, but also a flicker of defiance. It wasn't about convenience, Thalia. I loved you. Our life together, the foundation we'd built. I couldn't bear to destroy it. But I also couldn't abandon Valencia or our unborn child. So instead of making a hard choice, you chose to make no choice at all, Julian said, his voice trembling with restrained fury. You built an entire system of lies that lasted 50 years. How did you even pull it off? Logistically, I mean. His question was sharp, almost clinical, as if he were trying to understand the mechanics of the betrayal to make sense of the emotional wreckage. Eliza leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. 50 years of juggling two lives without either family suspecting. It sounds impossible. A shadow crossed Desmond's face, not guilt exactly, but something close to it, perhaps a twisted pride in the intricacy of his deception. My work was the perfect cover, he explained. Marine engineering projects took me all over the world. No one questioned it when I was gone for weeks at a time. I set up a consulting business that gave me control over my schedule. Separate phones, separate emails, separate stories for each life. His voice was calm, almost detached, as if describing a business strategy rather than a betrayal. Separate versions of yourself, I added, my voice cutting through his explanation. The thought sent a chill through me. This man, my husband, had crafted two distinct personas, stepping between them with the ease of changing a coat. Desmond nodded slowly, his expression weary. In the beginning, it was exhausting, keeping track of what I'd told whom, ensuring there were no slip-ups. But over time, it became second nature. The transitions were seamless. I could move from one life to the other without even thinking about it. His casual admission of this psychological compartmentalization hit me like a physical blow. Who was this man? The Desmond I'd loved had been warm, attentive, a partner in every sense. But this Desmond, this stranger, had divided himself so completely, living two lives with such precision that it had taken 50 years to uncover. What about money? Valencia asked, her voice sharp, practical. You supported two households, helped put our children through college. How? Desmond glanced at me, then quickly away, as if afraid to meet my gaze. Thalia's family wealth made it possible, he said quietly. The Ashworth fortune meant money was never an issue in our new household. I could divert significant portions of my income to Serenity Cove without raising suspicions. So you used my family's money to fund your second family? I said. My voice flat, the betrayal sinking deeper. My father was right about you after all. The memory of that long-ago conversation before our wedding stung anew. My father's warning that Desmond might be after my inheritance, my fierce defense of his love, my insistence that he was different. How wrong I'd been. Valencia's brow furrowed. What do you mean? My father cautioned me before we married, I said, turning to Desmond, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. He thought you might be after my money. I told him you loved me, for me, not for the Ashworth name or fortune. I fought for you. The words felt like a confession, a painful admission of my own naivety. I did love you for you, Desmond insisted, leaning forward, his hand twitching as if to reach for mine before he stopped himself. The money just made everything else possible. His words landed like a slap, not a denial but a confirmation that financial calculation had been part of his deception all along. Did you ever think about ending one of these lives? Eliza asked, her voice softer now, tinged with vulnerability. Was there ever a moment when you considered choosing? Her question hung in the air, raw and aching, the plea of a daughter desperate to understand. Desmond's expression softened as he looked at her, his eyes filled with a father's love, but also a deep sorrow. There were moments, yes, he admitted, times when the weight of it all felt crushing. But by then the consequences of coming clean seemed too much to bear. How could I tell either of you that our entire relationship was built on lies? What would that do to you, to Julian, to Thalia? His voice cracked, and for a moment I saw the man I'd loved, the one who'd always tried to shield me from pain. But that man was gone, buried beneath decades of deceit. So you just kept going, Julian said, his tone heavy with disgust, planning to take this secret to your grave. I suppose I was, Desmond admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't courage that kept me going. It was cowardice, fear of losing everyone I loved. The silence that followed was suffocating, the weight of his confession pressing down on us all. Outside, the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Institute's grounds, a quiet reminder that the world continued to turn even as our lives unraveled. How did you find out? Desmond asked finally, his gaze shifting between Valencia and me, a trace of curiosity breaking through his resignation. I exchanged a glance with Valencia, who gave a slight nod, granting me permission to answer. I found a wooden box in our garage, I said, my voice calm but laced with the pain of that discovery. Photographs, letters, birth certificates, everything you'd hidden for decades. The memory of that moment still burned, the dusty box tucked behind old paint cans, the shock of seeing Valencia's name. Julian's, Eliza's, a second life laid bare in faded ink and worn photographs. Desmond closed his eyes briefly, his face etched with pain. "The anniversary box," he said softly. "I kept it in a storage unit, but with our 50th coming up, I wanted to add some mementos. I must have forgotten to put it back." His voice was heavy with the weight of that single, careless mistake. "One slip after 50 years of perfect deception," I said, a bitter edge to my voice. "Impressive in its way." "What happens now?" Desmond asked, his eyes moving between us, searching for some hint of the future. It was the question we'd all been circling, the one none of us had fully answered despite hours of planning. "What did you do when a 50-year lie was exposed? How did you move forward from a betrayal so profound it reshaped your entire reality?" Valencia straightened, her posture reclaiming the authority of her role as institute director. "Now, Desmond, you listen," she said, her voice firm, unwavering. "For 50 years, you've controlled the narrative, shaped our lives around your lies. Now it's our turn." She turned to me, a silent question in her eyes. We'd prepared for this moment, discussed it in painstaking detail, but the final move was mine. I nodded once, resolute. "Thalia has something to show you," Valencia said, her tone neutral, but her eyes sharp with anticipation. I reached into my bag and pulled out a leather portfolio, sliding it across the table to Desmond. He opened it with visible trepidation, his fingers hesitating as he scanned the first page. "What is this?" he asked, his voice tight. "A complete accounting of your financial relationship with the Ashworth family holdings," I said calmly, though my heart raced with the weight of what I was about to do. "Over our 50-year marriage, you've benefited significantly from my family's wealth while contributing nothing to the principal. The house in Cascadia Bay, the investment accounts, the art collection, all remain solely in my name, protected by the prenuptial agreement you signed in 1975. Desmond nodded slowly, unsurprised. "I never disputed that," he said. "The Ashworth fortune was always yours, Thalia. I never claimed otherwise." "No, but you used it," I replied, my voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath. "You leveraged my wealth to build your life of comfort and prestige, to fund your consulting and business, which in turn supported your second family. You enjoyed the connections, the opportunities, the freedom that came with being an Ashworth by marriage." He didn't deny it, simply turning to the next document in the folder. "This," I continued, "is a revised estate plan I've recently implemented. I've established a trust for Valencia and your children to ensure their financial security moving forward. A portion of the Ashworth Foundation has been redirected to fund marine conservation efforts here in Serenity Cove, securing the Institute's work in perpetuity." Desmond's head snapped up, genuine shock registering on his face for the first time. "You're giving money to Valencia and the children?" he asked, disbelief coloring his voice. "Why would you do that?" "Because they're innocent in this, just as I am," I said simply, my voice steady despite the storm inside us. "And because I have the means to ensure they don't suffer financially from the collapse of the life you built on lies." I glanced at Valencia, whose expression remained carefully neutral, though I caught the slight softening in her posture, relief perhaps, that this part of our plan was unfolding as intended. "That's remarkably generous," Desmond said cautiously, as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. "It's not generosity," I corrected, my voice firm. "It's justice. For 50 years, you diverted resources from one family to another. I'm simply making it right, bringing your actions into the light." Desmond continued reading, his expression growing more troubled as he reached the final document. "Divorce papers," he said, his voice flat, resigned. "Already prepared." "Already filed," I corrected. "My attorney submitted them yesterday. Given the circumstances, I don't expect any complications in court." Eliza leaned forward, her voice small but urgent. "What about our parents' marriage?" she asked, looking between Valencia and Desmond. "Legally, I mean." Valencia answered before Desmond could. "As Thalia mentioned, my marriage to your father was never legally valid since he was already married to her. In the eyes of the law, you and Julian were born out of wedlock." Julian made a soft sound of distress, but Valencia continued, her voice steady. However, Thalia's attorneys have included provisions to protect your legal rights as Desmond's acknowledged children. Your inheritance from him will be secure, regardless of any marriage's status. Desmond closed the folder slowly, his hands steady now, as if the weight of inevitability had settled over him. "This is very thoroughly planned," he said, his voice quiet but tinged with something like admiration. "How long have you been working on this?" "Since the moment I found the box," I replied. 10 days. 10 days to dismantle a 50-year lie, to rebuild a future from the ashes of betrayal. 10 days to decide what justice looked like, what healing might mean for all of us sitting around this table. Desmond sat at the polished oak table, his hands clasped tightly, his knuckles pale against the dark wood. His voice trembled with a mix of disbelief and resignation as he spoke, his words heavy with the weight of realization. 10 days, he murmured, shaking his head as if trying to dislodge the truth. In just 10 days, you've unraveled everything I spent 50 years building. His eyes, once sharp with confidence, now flickered with something softer. Regret, perhaps, or the dawning awareness of his own fragility. I leaned forward slightly, my tone measured but kinder than it had been earlier in the confrontation. "What you built, Desmond, was a mirage," I said, my voice steady but laced with a quiet sorrow. "A carefully woven dream that could never hold up under the weight of reality. No lie this grand can endure forever." My words weren't meant to wound, though I knew they did. They were simply the truth, laid bare after weeks of planning and sleepless nights spent grappling with the enormity of his deception. Desmond's shoulders slumped, his nod slow and deliberate, like a man conceding a battle he'd known he'd lose. His amber eyes, clouded with the gravity of his situation, met mine for a fleeting moment before dropping to the table. "Where do we go from here?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Practical yet tinged with desperation. I mean, practically speaking, do I just walk away from both homes, both lives? The question hung in the air, raw and unresolved, echoing the countless debates we'd had during our secret meetings to orchestrate this moment. None of us, Valencia, Julian, Eliza, or I, had found a tidy answer to what would become of Desmond once the truth was exposed. Valencia spoke first, her voice calm but resolute, carrying the weight of a woman who had made her peace with the wreckage. "That's your choice to make, Desmond," she said, her dark eyes steady as they held his gaze. "I have no desire to continue our relationship, but you remain the father of my children, the grandfather of my grandchildren. Those ties can't be erased, no matter how much I might wish they could." Her words were measured, but beneath them lay a current of pain, a mother's instinct to protect her family even as she severed the bond with the man who had betrayed her. "I've already started untangling our lives here in Cascadia Bay," she added, her tone clipped, professional. "The process is underway." I nodded, picking up where she left off, my voice calm but firm. "The divorce will be finalized as swiftly as possible. You can collect your personal belongings from the house next week. I've arranged for you to stay at the Meridian Heights Hotel in the meantime." The practicality of my words felt like a lifeline, a way to anchor myself amidst the emotional storm. Desmond's face registered the information with a slight tilt of his head, his expression etched with the stark realization that 5 decades of stability, 2 families, 2 lives, had crumbled in the span of a single afternoon. He exhaled softly, his voice barely audible. "I understand," he said, the words heavy with acceptance. Then, with a visible effort to summon his courage, he straightened slightly. "May I speak now?" he asked, his tone stripped of its earlier defensiveness, revealing a raw vulnerability that caught me off guard. "Not to justify what I've done. There's no justification for it. But to explain, if you'll allow me." His eyes darted between us, searching for permission, for a chance to lay bare the truth he'd hidden for so long. The 4 of us, Valencia, Julian, Eliza, and I, exchanged glances, a silent conversation passing between us. It felt only fair to grant him this moment, however inadequate his words might prove to be. Julian, his jaw tight but his voice steady, spoke for us all. "Go ahead," he said, his tone clipped but not unkind. Desmond took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly as he gathered his thoughts. When he spoke, his voice was softer, more honest than I'd ever heard it. For 50 years, I've woven a web of lies so intricate, I almost believed it myself, he began, his eyes fixed on a point somewhere beyond the room, as if he could see the decades unspooling before him. But if I'm to end this, let it be with the truth. The absolute truth is that I loved you both, Thalia, Valencia, deeply, genuinely. Not in the same way, perhaps, not with the same intensity at every moment, but with an authenticity I can't deny. He turned to me, his gaze steady despite the tears threatening to spill. Thalia, with you, I found a partner who challenged me, who expanded my world in ways I never thought possible. Our late-night talks about art, literature, science, they weren't just conversations. They were the scaffolding of my mind, the foundation of who I became. The life we built was elegant, vibrant, a tapestry of ideas and ambitions. I felt free with you, unburdened by expectations, able to chase my dreams without fear of judgment. Then he turned to Valencia, his voice softening further, thick with emotion. And you, Valencia, you gave me roots, a sense of purpose I couldn't find anywhere else. The work we did at the Institute, the children we raised, Julian, Eliza, you became my anchor, my legacy. Watching our children grow, seeing them become the people they are, that's been my greatest pride. The Institute, the research, the impact we made together, it gave my work meaning, a connection to the world beyond myself. He spread his hands in a gesture of defeat, his shoulders sagging under the weight of his confession. I couldn't choose between you because both of you were essential to who I am. I told myself that maintaining both lives was the kinder choice, that breaking either of your hearts would be worse than living this lie. I convinced myself I could balance it all, that I could keep you both safe from pain. His voice broke, and he looked down, unable to meet our eyes. But I was wrong. I broke both your hearts anyway, and worse. I damaged my children's trust and destroyed whatever integrity I had left, the very thing I was trying to avoid. Valencia's voice cut through the silence, quiet but piercing. You did break our hearts, Desmond, she said, her tone steady, but laced with a grief she couldn't fully conceal. And you've left our children questioning everything they thought they knew about their father, about our family. Her words weren't cruel, but they carried the weight of truth, unadorned and unrelenting. Desmond nodded, his face crumpling slightly as he fought to maintain his composure. I know, he said, his voice thick with remorse, and I won't ask for forgiveness. What I've done is unforgivable. But I need you to believe this. Every decision I made, every lie I told, it began and ended with love. Selfish, misguided love, perhaps, but love all the same. His amber eyes, bright with unshed tears, moved from one of us to the next, pleading for understanding, if not absolution. The room fell silent, the weight of his words settling over us like a fog. Outside, the light had shifted, the golden glow of late afternoon giving way to the lengthening shadows of evening. In the harbor beyond the windows, fishing boats bobbed gently, their navigation lights flickering on against the deepening twilight. The world outside moved on, indifferent to the devastation within these walls. I surprised myself by speaking first, my voice soft but clear. I believe you, I said, the admission catching in my throat. I believe you loved us both, in your way. I even believe you thought you were sparing us pain. I paused, searching for the right words to bridge the chasm between us. But love without honesty isn't love, Desmond. It's just another way to control those you claim to care about. Julian pushed his chair back abruptly, the sound sharp against the quiet. I need air, he said, his voice tight with barely contained emotion. Without waiting for a response, he strode toward the door, his footsteps echoing in the stillness. Eliza hesitated, her eyes lingering on her father, torn between anger and the lingering bond of family. After a moment, she followed her brother, pausing briefly beside Desmond's chair. She rested a hand on his shoulder, not in forgiveness, but in acknowledgement of the complex ties that still bound them despite his betrayal. We'll talk more later, Dad, she said softly, her voice heavy with unspoken questions, before slipping out of the room. With Julian and Eliza gone, the three of us remained, Desmond, Valencia, and I, an intimate, fractured triangle forged by 50 years of shared and separate histories. Valencia broke the silence, her tone more clinical than compassionate. "What will you do now, Desmond?" she asked, her eyes narrowing slightly as she studied him. "Where will you go?" Desmond ran a hand through his silver hair, a gesture so familiar it sent a pang through my chest despite everything. "I haven't thought that far ahead," he admitted, his voice weary. "Find an apartment, I suppose. Try to salvage whatever professional relationships haven't been destroyed by this." His words were tentative, as if he were testing the ground beneath him, unsure if it would hold. Valencia nodded, her expression softening slightly. "Your research is valuable," she said, her tone matter-of-fact. "The Institute would be willing to continue collaborating with you in a strictly professional capacity, if that's something you want." Desmond's face brightened with a flicker of gratitude. "I'd like that," he said quietly, the words carrying a faint hope. Then he turned to me, his expression shifting to something more personal, more vulnerable. "Thalia, the nautical map collection. It's as much yours as mine. I wouldn't dream of claiming it. Take the ones that mean the most to you." I nodded, my throat tight with the weight of memories. "Some things are worth preserving, even if their context has changed," I said, my voice softer than I intended. A strange calm had settled over me. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, but a clarity that cut through the initial shock and betrayal. Sitting here with Valencia, the other woman who had loved Desmond, I felt an unexpected kinship, a shared understanding that transcended the pain of his deception. Valencia rose from her chair, smoothing her skirt with a deliberate motion. "I should check on Julian and Eliza," she said, her voice steady but tired. "Desmond, we'll finish this conversation another time. For now, I think it's best if you find other accommodations." He nodded, accepting her dismissal without protest. "Of course," he said, his voice subdued. "I'll get a room at the Harbor Inn." As Valencia left the room, the door closing softly behind her, Desmond and I were alone for the first time since the truth had come to light. 50 years of marriage distilled into this surreal moment. Two people who knew each other intimately, yet were now separated by an unbridgeable gulf of lies. "I'm sorry, Thalia," Desmond said softly, his voice breaking the silence. "For whatever that's worth." "It's worth something," I replied, my tone measured but not unkind. "Not enough to change what happens next, but something." "No," he agreed, his eyes dropping to the table. "Nothing could change that now." He hesitated, then asked, "Will you be returning to Cascadia Bay immediately?" I shook my head, a small, sad smile tugging at my lips. "I'm staying a few days. There are details to finalize with Valencia and her children. And besides," I added, my voice softening, "I find I like Serenity Cove. There's an authenticity here that speaks to me." Desmond's face softened, a flicker of nostalgia crossing his features. "I've always thought so," he said. "From the first time I visited, it reminded me of the coastal town where my grandmother lived. Simpler, more connected to the rhythms of the natural world." The ordinariness of his words felt jarring against the backdrop of our shattered marriage, yet they were a necessary bridge, a fleeting connection between the life we'd shared and the uncertain future ahead. "I should go," he said finally, rising from his chair, "unless there's anything else we need to discuss now." I considered the question, my mind sifting through 50 years of memories, laughter, arguments, quiet moments of bliss, and now this monumental betrayal. Was there anything left to say? "Just one thing," I said, meeting his gaze directly. "Was any of it real? Us, I mean, the life we built together." Desmond held my gaze, his expression more open, more vulnerable than I'd seen in years. "All of it was real, Thalia," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "The love, the partnership, the joy we found in discovery, it was all real. The only lie was that it was exclusive." I nodded, accepting this partial truth as the most complete one I was likely to receive. "Goodbye, Desmond," I said, my voice calm but final. "Goodbye, Thalia," he replied softly. "Thank you for 50 extraordinary years." Then he was gone, the door closing quietly behind him, leaving me alone in the conference room with the weight of half a century settling around me like dust after a collapse. I remained seated, my eyes drawn to the window, where dusk was settling over Serenity Cove. Lights blinked on along the harbor, fishing boats secured for the night, their gentle bobbing a reminder of the world's quiet continuity. My phone chimed, pulling me from my thoughts. A text from Valencia. Julian and Eliza are with me at home. Join us for dinner if you'd like. No pressure. Her kindness struck me deeply, a gesture of grace in the wake of such profound betrayal. I texted back a simple acceptance and gathered my documents, preparing to leave the Institute. As I walked through the quiet hallways, I passed displays celebrating marine conservation, research breakthroughs, and community programs, many bearing Desmond's name as a contributor or founder. His legacy here was undeniable, a testament to his brilliance and dedication. Yet the same man who had advanced marine habitat restoration, who had mentored young scientists and raised compassionate children, had also deceived two women for half a century. How did one reconcile such contradictions? Outside, the evening air was sharp with the scent of salt and jasmine. I paused on the Institute's steps, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of the afternoon begin to lift, if only slightly. The path ahead was daunting. Divorce proceedings, financial disentanglements, explanations to friends in Cascadia Bay. But beneath the logistics lay a simpler truth. I was free. Free from the shadow of deception, free from the subtle disconnection that had haunted even our happiest moments. Free to reimagine my life, unburdened by a marriage built on half-truths. As I walked toward Valencia's cedar-shingled house, where warm lights glowed against the gathering darkness, I found myself thinking not of what I'd lost, but of what I might yet discover. At 73, I had more years behind me than ahead, but those remaining years stretched before me like uncharted waters, intimidating, yes, but brimming with possibility. Valencia opened the door before I could knock, her face a complex blend of exhaustion and relief. From the kitchen, I heard Julian and Eliza's voices, the ordinary sounds of meal preparation cutting through the extraordinary weight of the day. "They're making pasta," Valencia said with a small smile. "Cooking helps Julian process, always has since he was a boy." "A useful coping mechanism," I observed, stepping into the warm entryway. "Better than most." Valencia nodded, taking my coat. "How did the rest of your conversation with Desmond go?" "Quietly," I replied, anticlimactically considering the circumstances. 50 years ended with a simple goodbye. "Endings are rarely as dramatic as we imagine," Valencia said, leading me toward the kitchen. The air was fragrant with garlic and herbs, steam rising from a pot on the stove. Julian stood at the counter, chopping vegetables with precise, controlled movements, his face a mask of focus. Eliza sat at the island, a glass of wine in hand, her expression distant but thoughtful. They both looked up as we entered, their faces registering a mix of emotions, wariness, perhaps, but also a tentative warmth. "I hope it's okay that I'm here," I said, suddenly uncertain despite Valencia's invitation. "Of course," Julian replied, his voice surprisingly warm. "We're making enough pasta to feed a small fishing fleet. Mom said you might join us." Eliza added, raising her glass slightly. "If anyone deserves a drink tonight, it's the three of us." Valencia retrieved a bottle of white wine from the refrigerator, pouring 4 glasses. "Here's to talking about anything. Anything other than Desmond Merrick for a few hours," she said, handing me a glass. Gladly, I agreed, accepting it with a small smile. "Tell me about your research instead. The kelp forest restoration project sounds fascinating." As Julian and Eliza exchanged glances, a subtle tension eased from the room. Over the next few hours, conversation flowed around safer topics: marine biology, Julian's architectural practice in Portland, Eliza's children and their endless activities, my wellness center in Cascadia Bay. By the time we finished a simple but delicious meal of pasta with fresh vegetables and local seafood, a tentative comfort had settled among us. Not friendship, not yet, but a shared understanding, a mutual respect forged in the crucible of shared betrayal. "What happens tomorrow?" Eliza asked as we cleared the dishes, finally broaching the subject we'd avoided all evening. Valencia and I exchanged glances, the weight of our earlier discussions lingering between us. "Tomorrow we begin moving forward," Valencia said firmly. "I have the Institute to run. You both have your lives and families to return to. Thalia has arrangements to make in Cascadia Bay." "And Dad?" Julian asked quietly, his voice heavy with unspoken questions. Your father will find his own way, I replied. He's resourceful, resilient. He built 2 lives. I'm confident he can build a new one now. Eliza's expression darkened, her brow furrowing. Should we just cut him off completely after everything? That's your decision, Valencia said, her tone gentle but firm. Your relationship with your father exists apart from his deception, at least in part. You can maintain those bonds in whatever way feels right to you. What about you, Thalia? Julian asked, his eyes searching mine. After 50 years, can you just walk away completely? The question demanded honesty, and I took a moment to consider it. Could I erase Desmond from my life after half a century of shared dreams, shared joys, shared history? I don't know, I admitted. The divorce will proceed, that's certain. Beyond that, time will tell. 50 years creates ties that can't be severed cleanly, even after a betrayal like this. Valencia nodded, her expression reflecting a shared understanding. Endings are rarely absolute, even when we think they should be. As the evening drew to a close, I prepared to return to my hotel. Julian and Eliza embraced their mother warmly, then surprised me with equally sincere hugs. Thank you, Julian said quietly as he walked me to the door, for your generosity toward our family. You could have handled this differently. Punishing innocent people for Desmond's deception would only deepen the damage, I replied. Besides, I've lived long enough to know that vengeance offers little in the way of lasting peace. He smiled faintly, a glimmer of respect in his eyes. Wisdom, he said simply, and I nodded, stepping out into the cool night air, ready to face the uncharted waters of tomorrow. The realization that wisdom doesn't always come with age struck me as I stood in the soft glow of Serenity Cove's starlit sky. My conversation with Julian had sparked a flicker of levity when I'd pointed out Desmond's staggering lapse in judgment at 73. Julian's laughter, bright and unguarded, sliced through the weight of the moment, a reminder that even in the wreckage of betrayal, there could be unexpected lightness. Yet, as I stepped into the night, the cool sea breeze brushing my skin with the faint tang of salt and the promise of distant rain, my heart grew heavy again. The stars above glittered coldly, the same constellations that had watched over Cascadia Bay, tying together the fractured halves of a life I'd only just begun to see. Walking back to my hotel, the crunch of gravel underfoot steadied my thoughts. Serenity Cove's quiet streets, lined with weathered shingle houses, felt both foreign and intimate, a paradox born of Desmond's secret life. My mind churned with the strange new threads weaving themselves into my existence. There was Valencia, a woman whose presence I hadn't anticipated, but whose shared pain had kindled an improbable kinship. Julian and Eliza, Desmond's children, had offered a cautious respect that surprised me, their guarded warmth softening the edges of my anger. And this place, Serenity Cove, Desmond's hidden refuge, had begun to feel less like a wound and more like a possibility, a canvas for connections I hadn't sought but couldn't dismiss. The pain of his deception, raw and unyielding, had cracked open a space where new relationships might take root, fragile yet resilient, like wildflowers pushing through stone. In my hotel room, the silence was broken by the distant murmur of waves. As I crossed the threshold, my eyes caught on a single envelope slipped beneath the door, its stark presence a quiet intrusion. My fingers hesitated before lifting it, recognizing Desmond's distinctive script. The note inside was a confession, a plea, a shard of his heart laid bare. Thalia, it began, and I braced myself against the flood of words. He called me his brightest star, his intellectual match, the anchor of his emotions, his most treasured companion across 50 years. Each phrase landed like a stone in still water. Rippling through the life we'd built, he admitted his failure, not as a reflection of me or our marriage, but as his own profound weakness, a flaw that had led him to betray the exclusivity our vows demanded. He spoke of the trust fund I'd created for Valencia and their children, praising my generosity as a quality he'd admired but never matched. His gratitude for my compassion, where condemnation would have been justified, felt like a weight I wasn't ready to carry. He'd retreated to a small inn at the town's edge, leaving the door open for conversation. Or closed, if I chose. Whatever lay ahead, he wrote, Loving me had been a privilege, however imperfectly he'd shown it. I set the letter on the bedside table, my emotions a tangled storm too vast to name. Forgiveness felt impossible, a distant shore obscured by the magnitude of his deceit. Yet beneath the anger and grief, a faint understanding stirred, a tentative step toward a perspective that might one day allow me to weave this betrayal into the fabric of my life. Outside, Serenity Cove's lights twinkled against the velvet dark, fishing boats swaying gently at their moorings, the lighthouse's rhythmic pulse guiding ships through uncertain waters. Tomorrow would demand decisions, conversations, the unraveling of a half-century marriage while salvaging dignity and purpose. But tonight, in this liminal space between past and future, I let myself breathe. I acknowledged the sting of betrayal and the strange freedom it had birthed. A freedom to redefine myself, not as Desmond Merrick's wife, not as an Ashworth heiress, but as Thalia, a woman of 70 with unwritten chapters still to shape. 3 months slipped by like seasons, gradual then sudden. Spring melted into summer in Serenity Cove, the days stretching longer, the waters warming under a generous sun. The tourist season swept in, filling the coastal town with visitors drawn to its unpolished charm. Life reordered itself around the truth Desmond's revelation had exposed. I'd returned to Cascadia Bay a week after our confrontation, lingering in Serenity Cove only long enough to finalize arrangements with Valencia and her children. The divorce proceeded with a clinical efficiency that surprised me. Desmond offered no resistance, signing papers promptly, attending meetings with a somber dignity. By midsummer, our 50-year marriage was dissolved, reduced to ink on documents in a judge's final word. The house in Meridian Heights felt hollow without Desmond's presence, yet oddly expansive, as if his absence had carved out space for me to claim. I rearranged furniture, repainted walls in soft hues of sage and cream, making subtle changes that declared the space mine. The nautical maps he'd loved stayed on the walls, though I shifted their positions, a quiet assertion of independence that carried more weight than it seemed. News of our separation rippled through Cascadia Bay's social circles, prompting questions I met with a practiced response: irreconcilable differences, an amicable parting. To a few trusted friends, I shared the truth, their shocked faces mirroring the disbelief I'd felt. "You seemed so perfect together," Vivian, my oldest friend, had gasped over lunch at our favorite waterfront bistro. I never saw him glance at another woman. I'd smiled wryly. He didn't need to, just one specific woman who happened to be his other wife. The dark humor was a lifeline, a way to navigate the tides of anger, grief, and betrayal that surged and receded unpredictably. One Tuesday morning, I stood in the specialty food market Desmond and I had visited for decades, staring at a display of artisanal olive oils. He'd always chosen them, his selections made with the confidence of a connoisseur. Now alone, I held a bottle, struck by the absurd realization that I didn't know my own preference. Had I ever formed one, or simply trusted his taste? That day, I bought 3 bottles and held a tasting at home, discovering I favored the grassy Tuscan variety over the peppery Spanish one he'd always picked. It was a small act, but it echoed the larger journey of rediscovery that defined my days. The financial arrangements I'd initiated moved forward. The trust for Valencia and her children was established, securing their future while preserving their pride. The Marine Conservation Endowment at the Serenity Cove Institute was announced with fanfare, though I declined to attend the dedication, sending a brief letter of congratulations instead. Desmond, it seemed, had vanished from both Serenity Cove and Cascadia Bay. Valencia, with whom I maintained occasional contact, said he'd resigned from the institute, recommending younger colleagues to carry on his work. He'd left his Serenity Cove home, taking only personal items and research materials, leaving the rest for Valencia. Rumors swirled: Seattle, San Francisco, then Auckland, where a marine research facility had reportedly offered him a position. I neither confirmed nor denied these whispers. The truth was, I didn't know where Desmond was, nor did I care to. The man I'd married, or thought I'd married, felt like a ghost, perhaps never real to begin with. One warm July evening, I sat on my deck overlooking Cascadia Bay, watching sailboats drift into the marina as the sunset painted the water in hues of gold and crimson. My phone chimed, Valencia's name lighting the screen. Our conversations had been brief, focused on practical matters or updates about Julian and Eliza. "Hello, Valencia," I said, settling into my chair. "How are you?" Her voice, with its familiar rasp, carried a warmth that surprised me. "Well enough. The Institute's summer program is bustling, students everywhere, determined to save the oceans overnight." I smiled at her affectionate exasperation. "And Cascadia Bay?" she asked. "Quiet," I replied. "The divorce was finalized last week." A pause followed, then her gentle question. "How does it feel being unmarried after 50 years? I watched a heron skim the water, its wings slicing the air. Strange, liberating, melancholy all at once. Her soft response, "I understand," bridged the distance between us, a shared moment of recognition. Valencia's next words caught me off guard. "I'm calling with an invitation. Julian's opening a restaurant in Serenity Cove next month. Sustainable seafood, local ingredients. He's calling it Tide Pool. The grand opening is August 15th, and he asked me to invite you." The gesture surprised me. Julian had been polite during our brief interactions, but I hadn't expected an ongoing connection. "That's kind of him," I said cautiously, "but wouldn't my presence stir things up? A reminder of everything?" Valencia's laugh was warm, disarming. "Thalia, you're part of this story now, like it or not. Besides, your foundation's grant supports the fishermen supplying Julian's restaurant. He sees you as a patron saint." I demurred, though the idea warmed me more than I'd expected. "Let me think about it," I said. "The wellness center keeps me busy." Valencia's gentle interruption, "You're the owner, Thalia. You can take a weekend," lingered as we ended the call. I stayed on the deck as twilight deepened, weighing her invitation. Returning to Serenity Cove would mean facing the place where my world had shattered, but it would also mean embracing the unexpected bonds forged in its aftermath. 2 weeks later, I was driving the coastal highway to Serenity Cove, the route now familiar yet charged with new meaning. I'd arranged for my assistant to manage the wellness center, packed a small bag, and left Cascadia Bay with a blend of anticipation and unease. The Harbor View Inn welcomed me like an old friend, the young receptionist smiling as she handed me my key. "Room 312 this time," she said. "Best view of the harbor, perfect for the weekend festivities." "Festivities?" I asked, signing the registration card. "The Serenity Cove Seafood Festival," she explained. "It's happening the same weekend as the new restaurant opening. Tide Pool. The harbor will be alive all weekend." My room's view was breathtaking. Fishing boats bobbing at their moorings, strings of lights twinkling along the pier, festival banners fluttering in the breeze. After settling in, I texted Valencia to confirm my arrival. Her reply was swift. "Wonderful, Julian's at the restaurant. Join us at Au for a private tour before the preview dinner." Tide Pool occupied a renovated boathouse at the pier's end, its weathered exterior accented by large windows framing the water. A hand-painted sign depicted a tide pool ecosystem, the restaurant's name in elegant blue script. Valencia greeted me at the door, her silver-streaked hair loose, her usual professional attire replaced by a teal linen dress. "You made it," she said, her embrace brief but warm. "Julian's in the kitchen, wrestling with a sourdough crisis, but he'll surface soon." The restaurant's interior was stunning. Polished concrete floors, reclaimed wood tables, and floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the harbor. Maritime artifacts adorned the walls, antique fishing gear, vintage photos of Serenity Cove, scientific illustrations of local marine life. "It's beautiful," I said, admiring the space. "Julian has an eye for design." Valencia nodded. "He studied architecture before finding his passion for cooking. It shows." As if summoned, Julian emerged from the kitchen, his chef's coat crisp, his face shifting from stress to joy when he saw me. "Thalia, you came," he said, crossing the room to greet me. "Thank you. It means a lot." His sincerity disarmed me. "I'm honored," I replied. "The space is magnificent," Valencia beamed. "Wait until you taste the food. Julian's menu highlights local seafood, supporting sustainable fishing. Your grant helps the fishermen who supply us." Julian nodded. "The foundation's work is making a difference. We're featuring the fishermen's stories on our menu, connecting diners to the source." As Julian explained his culinary vision, I watched the easy bond between him and Valencia, her pride in his work palpable. For a fleeting moment, I tried to imagine Desmond here, celebrating his son, supporting his wife. The image wouldn't hold, as if Desmond himself were fading into abstraction. "Would you like to see the kitchen?" Julian asked, pulling me back. "I'd love to," I said, following him into a gleaming space of stainless steel and white tile. Chefs moved with precision, preparing for the evening. "Everyone, attention," Julian called. "This is Thalia Ashworth, director of the Ashworth Foundation, whose grant supports our suppliers. She's our guest of honor tonight." The staff nodded, some smiling before resuming their work. Julian guided me through the kitchen, detailing equipment and ingredients with pride. "Your father would be proud," I said impulsively, then froze, regretting the words. Mentioning Desmond felt like a misstep, a crack in the fragile peace we'd built. Julian's hands paused, his expression unreadable for a moment, before he nodded slightly. "Maybe," he said softly, and we moved on, the moment passing but leaving a quiet ache in its wake. Julian stood in the kitchen, a tray of fresh herbs in his hands, their earthy aroma mingling with the briny scent of seafood simmering nearby. His face remained calm, almost serene, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of contemplation as he spoke. "Maybe," he said, his voice soft yet deliberate, "but honestly, I'm not sure Dad would have truly grasped what we're trying to do here." His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken layers of memory and meaning. I tilted my head, curious, and asked, "How do you mean? Your father always had a deep appreciation for excellence, didn't he?" It was true, Desmond had reveled in the finer things. Exquisite meals, meticulously crafted objects, the thrill of intellectual triumphs. Those were the cornerstones of the life we'd shared for half a century. Julian's gaze swept the bustling kitchen where sous chefs moved with practiced precision, their hands deftly preparing ingredients sourced from local waters. "Sure, he loved all that," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "But this is different. It's not just about perfection. It's about connection." His gesture encompassed the steaming pots, the vibrant herbs, the quiet rhythm of the kitchen. "It's about linking the people who eat this food to the ecosystem that sustains them. About honoring the fishermen whose work brings these ingredients to us." Dad, he was always more about building grand facades, wasn't he? Polished surfaces, impressive displays. I don't think he ever cared much for the deeper ties that hold it all together. His words landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through my thoughts. In that moment, Julian had crystallized something about Desmond I'd felt for years but never fully articulated. For 50 years, I'd lived alongside a man who preferred the flawless exterior to the messy, honest depths beneath. Desmond had been a master of presentation, curating moments to dazzle and impress. Yet he'd shied away from the raw, unpolished truths that give life its meaning. I felt a pang of recognition, sharp and unexpected, as if a veil had been lifted. "You're right," I said softly, my voice barely above a whisper. He would have admired the achievement of this place, but the heart of it, the connection, the purpose, he might have missed that entirely. Julian's eyes met mine, and a quiet understanding passed between us, warm and unspoken. He nodded, a small gesture that felt like a bridge spanning the chasm of our shared loss. We left the kitchen and returned to the dining room, where the hum of conversation greeted us. Valencia, radiant and composed, was speaking with a young woman whose familiar features caught my eye. It was Eliza, her daughter. "Look who showed up early," Valencia said with a warm smile, gesturing toward Eliza, who turned and offered me a grin that felt like sunlight breaking through clouds. "Thalia, I was hoping you'd be here," Eliza said, her voice brimming with genuine warmth. "The Foundation's quarterly report came in yesterday, and the conservation metrics are beyond anything we projected. Your team is doing extraordinary work." I shook my head gently, deflecting the praise. "Our team," I corrected, my tone soft but firm. "The Institute's expertise is what's driving this. We're just providing the resources." As the friends and family dinner began, I found myself seated at a table with Valencia, Eliza, and a handful of Institute researchers. The conversation flowed effortlessly, weaving through topics like marine conservation challenges, innovations in sustainable fishing, and Julian's remarkable journey as a chef. Desmond's absence lingered like a faint shadow at the edges of our minds, never overwhelming but always there. A quiet reminder of the life we'd all once known. Yet it didn't dominate. His presence felt like a ghost slowly fading into the background, no longer the center of our story. The food was nothing short of sublime. Each dish, from delicate seafood preparations to vibrant, locally sourced ingredients, celebrated the natural flavors of the region. Nothing felt ostentatious. Every plate was a testament to care and authenticity. Between courses, Julian emerged from the kitchen, his apron slightly askew, to share the story behind each dish. He spoke of specific fishing operations, seasonal harvest patterns, and traditional methods passed down through generations of coastal families. His passion was palpable, his words painting vivid pictures of the people and places tied to the food we savored. Valencia watched him with a mother's pride, her eyes glistening as he described an innovative crab dish with particular enthusiasm. "He's found his purpose," she said softly as Julian returned to the kitchen. "After everything we've been through, seeing him thrive like this, it heals something in me." Her voice carried a quiet strength, a resilience forged through pain. I reached out, touching her hand briefly. "You've raised incredible children," I said, my words earnest. "That's a triumph no one can take from you." Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but her smile was radiant. "Thank you, Thalia, for that and for everything else. Your support for the foundation, your trust, your grace through all of this." She paused, her gaze steady. "We were both betrayed, weren't we? Finding a way to move forward, to honor that shared experience, it feels like the only path that makes sense." I nodded, a quiet acknowledgement of the bond we'd forged, not through Desmond's deception but despite it. As the evening unfolded, I felt an unexpected ease settle over me. This gathering, this unlikely community of Valencia, her children, and the Institute's researchers, was bound not by the lies of the past, but by shared values, respect, purpose, and a commitment to something larger than ourselves. When dessert arrived, a delicate lavender panna cotta drizzled with local honey and studded with seasonal berries, Julian joined us briefly, accepting compliments with a humility that felt utterly genuine. "Will you stay for the seafood festival tomorrow?" he asked, his tone hopeful. "There's a dedication ceremony for the new research vessel your foundation funded." Eliza chimed in, her enthusiasm infectious. "Mom's giving a speech." I glanced at Valencia, who nodded encouragingly. "I'd be honored," I replied, surprised by how deeply I meant it. Later, as I walked back to my hotel along the moonlit harbor, the water shimmering like a sheet of silver, I found myself reflecting on the strange beauty of this moment. From the wreckage of Desmond's betrayal, something new had emerged. Not a replacement for the life I'd lost, but a network of connections rooted in shared purpose. I hadn't gained a new family, exactly, but perhaps something broader, a community bound by authenticity rather than convention. The thought brought a quiet peace, a sense that I was stepping into a new chapter, one I could write myself. The next morning, the seafood festival transformed the harbor into a vibrant tapestry of sights and sounds. The air buzzed with the chatter of visitors, the sizzle of cooking demonstrations, and the melodies of local musicians. I wandered through the booths, savoring samples of briny oysters and smoky grilled fish, watching families laugh and children dart through the crowd. At the appointed hour, I made my way to the main dock, where a sleek research vessel stood adorned with ceremonial bunting. A modest crowd had gathered, institute staff, local officials, and community members passionate about marine conservation. Valencia stood near the boarding ramp, elegant in a navy suit, her note cards in hand. She spotted me and waved me forward. "Perfect timing," she said with a smile. "They're about to start." A local official opened with brief remarks, followed by the Institute's board chair, who detailed the vessel's cutting-edge research capabilities. Then Valencia took the microphone, her presence commanding yet warm. "This vessel is more than a tool for science," she began, her voice clear and resonant. "It embodies our community's commitment to understanding and protecting the marine ecosystems that sustain us." As she spoke, outlining the vessel's conservation projects with precision and passion, I found myself struck by her poise. Here was a woman who had built something enduring, who had raised children to value truth and purpose, who had carved out a life of meaning despite unimaginable challenges. "We are deeply grateful to the Ashworth Foundation," Valencia said, gesturing toward me, "whose commitment to marine conservation aligns so perfectly with our mission." The crowd applauded, a few curious glances turning my way. I nodded, content to remain a quiet part of this moment, not its centerpiece. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed to enjoy the festival, Valencia approached. "Would you like a private tour of the vessel?" she asked. I agreed, and we boarded together, guided by a crew member through state-of-the-art labs, sonar systems, and water sampling equipment. Valencia asked insightful questions, her familiarity with the technology evident despite her administrative role. Standing on the deck afterward, the festival's vibrancy unfolding below, Valencia turned to me with a sudden question. "Have you heard from him?" There was no need to clarify who she meant. "No," I said simply, "not since the divorce was finalized." I paused, then asked, "You?" She shook her head. "Julian got a letter last month. Congratulations on the restaurant. Some memories of cooking together when he was a boy. Nothing deep. No mention of everything else." I nodded, unsurprised. Compartmentalization was always his strength. She looked at me, her eyes searching. "Do you miss him?" The question was gentle, curious, not accusatory. I took a moment to consider it, letting the truth settle. "I miss parts of the life we had," I admitted. "The routines, the companionship, the little traditions we built. But the man I miss, he was never fully real. He was always holding something back, living in pieces." I turned to her. "And you?" A wistful smile crossed her face. "It's complicated. He was the father of my children, my partner for 40 years. I miss that version of him. But knowing what I know now," she shrugged, a gesture that spoke volumes. "It changes everything." We stood in silence, the festival's energy swirling around us, seagulls soaring overhead, the sun glinting off the harbor. "What's next for you?" Valencia asked eventually. "Will you stay in Cascadia Bay?" I'd been grappling with that question myself. "For now, yes," I said. "The wellness center keeps me anchored, and there's comfort in the familiar. But I've been thinking about traveling, not the polished trips Desmond and I took, but something freer, more adventurous. A solo journey at 73. Valencia's eyes lit up. "I love that," she said, her approval warm. "And you, beyond the Institute?" She gestured to the festival below. "This place, this community, it's my home. My work, my kids, my identity are all here, but..." She smiled, a spark of mischief in her eyes. "I might carve out time to paint again. Watercolors used to be my passion before life got so busy." As we prepared to leave the vessel, Valencia hesitated, then spoke. "Would you consider joining the Institute's advisory board? Your financial expertise would be invaluable as we grow our conservation programs." The invitation caught me off guard. "You want me involved after everything?" I asked, half laughing. "Because of everything," she corrected, her voice steady. "You've shown judgment, compassion, and strategic thinking through all of this. Those are exactly what we need." Her confidence touched me deeply. "I'd be honored to consider it," I said. "Send me the details and we'll talk." That evening at a final dinner at Tide Pool, Julian treated us to a special tasting menu at the chef's table, each course a celebration of the region's bounty. As I packed my bag later, preparing to return to Cascadia Bay, I reflected on the unexpected bonds I'd formed, with Serenity Cove, with Valencia and her children, with the conservation work that now tied us together. From the ashes of Desmond's 50-year deception, something new had taken root, not a replacement for what was lost, but a connection grounded in truth and shared purpose. 3 months earlier, when I'd discovered Desmond's hidden life, standing at my hotel window watching moonlight dance on the harbor, I'd felt only grief. Now I felt peace, not because the betrayal had been erased, but because I'd found a path forward that honored my values. The wealth that had once enabled Desmond's double life was now fueling conservation efforts, supporting communities, and fostering transparency. As for Desmond, wherever he was, I felt neither anger nor longing. He would continue as he always had, crafting narratives to suit his needs. But I had chosen differently, a life of integration, honesty, and genuine connection. At 73, after 5 decades in someone else's story, I was finally writing my own.